The air in the cafe smelled of cinnamon and freshly ground coffee beans, a comforting scent that usually calmed my nerves after a long day of teaching. Today was different. My fingers trembled slightly as I arranged the stack of sign language flashcards on the small round table. Outside, rain pelted against the windows, creating a rhythmic soundtrack to my anxiety. I'd been living in this small coastal town for barely 3 months, still adjusting to life after graduate school, still trying to find my place as the new ASL teacher at Harborview Elementary. "More coffee, Miss Bennett." Marco, the barista, appeared with a steaming pot. His kind eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "Please. And it's Kate," I reminded him, pushing my cup forward. "Just Kate." "Of course, Miss Kate," he replied with a wink, filling my cup before shuffling away. I sighed and returned to my flashcards. The last bell of my Friday afternoon had rung 3 hours ago, but I still had weekend lesson plans to create. The coffee shop had become my sanctuary, a place where I could work undisturbed, away from my tiny apartment with its temperamental heating and paper-thin walls. Here, nestled in the back corner booth, I was invisible, just how I liked it. The bell above the door chimed. I glanced up automatically, then quickly dropped my gaze as a hush fell over the cafe. A little girl, perhaps 7 years old, stepped inside, clutching a worn teddy bear to her chest. Dark hair hung in neat pigtails around her delicate face, eyes cast down as she moved toward the counter. Behind her, a mountain of a man filled the doorway, broad-shouldered and imposing in a tailored black coat that seemed to repel the rain. Even from across the room, I could sense the power emanating from him. The set of his jaw, the watchful eyes that swept the cafe in one calculating glance. 2 men in dark suits flanked him, scanning every corner, every face. Everyone knew who Victor Moretti was, even newcomers like me. "The usual Mr. Moretti?" Marco's voice had changed, higher and more deferential. Victor nodded once, his hand resting protectively on his daughter's shoulder. "Isabella Moretti." The town whispered about her, the deaf daughter of the most dangerous man on the East Coast, a man whose name was spoken in hushed tones, whose business dealings were never discussed openly, whose reputation inspired both fear and a strange reverence. I tried not to stare, but something about the child caught my attention. The way she stood slightly apart from her father, isolated even in his presence, the way her tiny fingers moved in small, almost imperceptible gestures at her sides, as if she was signing to herself. A habit I recognized, a private language when the world couldn't or wouldn't understand. While Victor exchanged quiet words with Marco, Isabella drifted toward the children's bookshelf near my table. Her fingers trailed along the spines, lingering on a colorful copy of Where the Wild Things Are. When she pulled it from the shelf, a cascade of bookmarks and small paper crafts fell to the floor, scattering around her feet. Without thinking, I slid from my booth and knelt to help gather them. The little girl startled at my sudden appearance, taking a half step backward, clutching her teddy bear tighter. Up close, I could see her eyes, deep brown with flecks of amber, intelligent and wary beyond her years. "Sorry about that," I said, automatically signing as I spoke. It was a professional habit, one I couldn't break even outside the classroom. Her eyes widened, her small hands moved, quick but hesitant. "You know sign?" I nodded, gathering the last of the bookmarks. "I teach ASL at the school. I'm Kate." I kept my sign simple, clear, at a child's level. The change in her face was immediate, a smile that transformed her entire demeanor, like sun breaking through clouds. "I'm Isabella. No one here talks with hands except Mrs. Parker, and she's old and boring." I laughed, forgetting for a moment where I was and who was watching. Old like dinosaur old or just grown-up old? I signed with exaggerated expressions. "Like she was friends with dinosaurs," Isabella signed, her shoulders shaking with silent giggles, her teddy bear dangling forgotten from one hand. It was only when I felt a shadow fall over us that I realized how quiet the cafe had become. I looked up slowly, my smile fading as I met Victor Moretti's gaze. This close, I could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle, notes of cedar and amber. His eyes were the same deep brown as his daughter's, but where hers had warmed with laughter, his remained unreadable. "Miss..." His voice was surprisingly soft, an accent I couldn't place, warming the edges of his words. Bennett, I said, rising quickly to my feet. Kate Bennett. You know sign language. It wasn't a question. I teach it at the elementary school, I explained, suddenly very aware of the coffee stain on my cardigan and the messy bun I'd hastily pinned up hours ago. ASL is my specialty. Isabella's hands moved excitedly, tugging at her father's sleeve to get his attention, and I watched as Victor's gaze shifted to his daughter. His expression softened almost imperceptibly as she signed to him. I couldn't help but notice that while he seemed to understand what she was saying, his own signing was limited and stiff. My daughter says you sign beautifully, he translated, though Isabella had said more than that. She doesn't meet many people who can communicate with her properly. That's a shame, I said, surprising myself with my boldness. ASL is such a rich language, especially for children her age. He studied me for a long moment, and I resisted the urge to fidget under his scrutiny. Yes, he finally said. It is. Isabella tugged at her father's sleeve again and signed rapidly, her movements quick and insistent, punctuated with pleading looks. My daughter would like to know if you might join us, Victor said, gesturing to a table in the corner, the best in the house I noticed, with a clear view of both the door and the street outside. For hot chocolate, apparently, the last part came with the barest hint of amusement. It wasn't really a request. Behind him, I could see Marco watching with wide eyes, the other patrons pretending not to listen. Everything in me screamed to politely decline, to retreat to my safe corner with my flashcards and lesson plans. I'd be happy to, I heard myself say instead. Isabella beamed, already skipping toward the table, her teddy bear swinging by one arm. Victor held my gaze for a moment longer, something unreadable flickering in his eyes before he stepped aside to let me pass. The next hour passed in a blur. Isabella was starved for conversation, her small hands flying as she told me about her favorite storybooks, her pet goldfish named Bubble, how she liked drawing but hated the way crayons smelled. I responded in kind, sharing stories about my deaf uncle who had inspired my career, how I made special picture-based flashcards for my youngest students, my collection of stuffed elephants that started when I was about her age. Throughout it all, Victor watched. He sat slightly apart, one leg crossed over the other, his coffee untouched. His men stood nearby, their presence a constant reminder of who he was. Occasionally, Isabella would turn to include her father in our conversation, and he would nod or offer a brief response, but mostly he observed with those dark, assessing eyes. Miss Bennett, he said during a lull as Isabella carefully colored a paper napkin with crayons Marco had brought over. You mentioned you're new to Harborview. 3 months, I confirmed, suddenly self-conscious again. I moved here after finishing my master's program. And how are you finding our little town? I searched for a diplomatic answer. Quieter than I'm used to. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. That's one way to put it. Isabella signed something to her father, too quick for me to catch. His expression darkened momentarily before smoothing into careful neutrality. My daughter says your hands make pretty stories, he translated, though again, I suspected she had said more. She has had difficulties with previous tutors. I looked at Isabella, who rolled her eyes dramatically, a surprisingly adult gesture from such a small child. They talk slow like I'm a baby, she signed directly to me. Just because I can't hear doesn't mean I can't understand. People fear what they don't understand. I signed back, simplifying my language for her. Their loss, not yours. She smiled, then glanced at her father. Daddy is learning signs, but he's so slow, and his hands are too big. I bit my lip to keep from smiling, very aware that Victor was watching our exchange closely. I wondered how much he understood. Isabella is very bright, I said aloud, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes the most intelligent children are the most frustrated when adults underestimate them. Indeed. Victor checked his watch. Platinum, I noticed, probably worth more than my yearly salary. We should be going, Isabella. You have violin at 5. She sighed but nodded, gathering her crayons and carefully folded paper napkin artwork. Before standing, she signed quickly to me. Will you be here tomorrow? Same time? I hesitated, glancing at Victor. His face revealed nothing, but there was something in the intensity of his gaze that made my heart beat faster. "If your father doesn't object," I said cautiously. Victor considered me for a long moment. "My daughter has few friends," he said finally. "She seems to have taken a liking to you, Miss Bennet." "Kate," I corrected automatically, then wished I hadn't. "Kate," he repeated, my name sounding somehow different in his mouth. "Perhaps you would consider a more formal arrangement. Isabella's current ASL tutor is, as my daughter pointed out, somewhat behind the times." "Oh, I faltered, caught off guard. "I already have a full teaching schedule. I'm sure we could come to an arrangement that would compensate you adequately for your time." The way he said it made it clear that money was no object. "Say, Tuesday and Thursday evenings? At our home." Isabella was watching me hopefully, clutching her teddy bear to her chest again. I thought about my tiny apartment with its leaking faucets and mounting student loans. I thought about the rumors that surrounded the Moretti family, the whispered stories about Victor's business dealings. I thought about the way the cafe had fallen silent when he entered. "I'd need to check my schedule," I hedged. Victor reached into his jacket and withdrew a business card, pressing it into my hand. His fingers brushed against mine. "Warm and unexpectedly gentle. My private number," he said. "Call me tomorrow with your decision." I glanced down at the heavy cream cardstock, embossed with just a name and number. When I looked up again, there was something in his expression that hadn't been there before. A subtle intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. Isabella tugged at my sleeve to get my attention. "Please say yes," she signed, her small face earnest. "I get lonely in that big house." I smiled at her. "I'll think about it," I promised. Victor helped his daughter into her coat, his movements careful and protective. He retrieved a small pink backpack, which Isabella slipped onto her shoulders, the teddy bear's head poking out from the top. Before they left, he turned back to me. "Until tomorrow, Kate," he said, my name again sounding like something precious in his mouth. It wasn't a question. I watched them leave, Victor's hand engulfing his daughter's tiny one, the two bodyguards falling into step behind them. Through the window, I saw him lift Isabella into a sleek black car, raindrops beating on its polished surface. Marco appeared at my elbow, collecting the empty cups with trembling hands. "You should be careful, Miss Kate," he whispered, glancing nervously at the door. "Mr. Moretti isn't a man to be trifled with." "I was just being kind to his daughter," I said defensively. Marco's expression was pitying. "No one just is anything with the Morettis. Everything comes with a price." I thought about the business card burning a hole in my palm, the intensity in Victor's gaze, the hope in Isabella's eyes. "I'm just a teacher," I said, more to myself than to Marco. What could he possibly want from me? But as I gathered my flashcards and prepared to brave the rain, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just stepped into something much bigger than myself. A world with rules I didn't understand, and dangers I couldn't begin to imagine. And worse, some small, reckless part of me wanted to know more. I pulled my coat tighter around me and stepped out into the storm, the wind immediately whipping my hair across my face. As I hurried toward my apartment, I couldn't help glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see the black car following me through the rain-slicked streets. Tomorrow, I would have to make a decision. Tonight, I already knew what my answer would be. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I tossed and turned, Victor Moretti's business card on my nightstand like a silent accusation. By morning, dark circles shadowed my eyes, and my decision felt no clearer in the harsh light of day. I made coffee and carried it to my tiny balcony, watching the town come to life below me. Harborview was a contradiction, picturesque seaside charm on the surface, with undercurrents of something darker. In my 3 months here, I'd learned that certain businesses never seemed to struggle, certain officials looked the other way, and Victor Moretti's name was synonymous with both fear and respect. Yet no one ever spoke directly about what he did. His official business was real estate development, but the whispers suggested his true empire extended far beyond property. I ran my thumb over the embossed lettering on his card. What was I getting myself into? My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. Unknown number. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Miss Bennet." Victor's voice was unmistakable, even through the phone. "I hope I'm not disturbing your Saturday morning." I glanced at the clock. 9:07 a.m. No, I was just having coffee. Good. I realize I put you on the spot yesterday. Isabella hasn't stopped talking about you. Or signing, rather. There was a warmth in his tone when he mentioned his daughter. She's been up since dawn asking when she can see you again. I wondered if you might join us for lunch today. See the house, meet Isabella's current tutor, get a better sense of what the position would entail. My heart hammered against my ribs. I haven't decided yet. Of course. This is merely an opportunity for you to gather more information before making your decision. His tone was reasonable, but I sensed the steel beneath the velvet. My driver can collect you at noon. Not a request. I don't think... Kate. My name again, in that way that made it sound like something else entirely. Please. It would mean a great deal to Isabella. I closed my eyes, knowing I was making a choice that could change everything. Fine. Noon. Excellent. My driver will need your address. I gave it to him, then ended the call, my hands shaking slightly. What had I just agreed to? The next few hours passed in a blur of nervous energy. I changed outfits 3 times, settling on dark jeans and a soft blue sweater that my mother always said brought out my eyes. Professional, but not stuffy. At precisely noon, a text alerted me to a car waiting outside. I expected the black sedan from yesterday. Instead, a sleek, silver Bentley idled at the curb, drawing curious stares from my neighbors. The driver, a stern-faced man with military posture, opened the door for me. Miss Bennett, he nodded. I'm Ray. Mr. Moretti sent me. The interior smelled of leather and subtle cologne. As we pulled away from my apartment building, I noticed the partition between the front and back seats, the tinted windows that made me feel both protected and trapped. Is it far? I asked, trying to break the silence. About 20 minutes, Ray answered, eyes on the road. Mr. Moretti's estate is just outside town. Estate, of course. We drove along the coast before turning onto a private road that wound uphill through dense pines. The trees eventually gave way to manicured grounds, and my breath caught as the house came into view. House was an understatement. The Moretti residence was a sprawling stone mansion overlooking the ocean, with floor-to-ceiling windows that caught the midday sun. Ray pulled up to the entrance, where Victor himself waited on the steps. He wore charcoal slacks and a crisp white shirt, open at the collar, more casual than yesterday, but no less intimidating. Kate, he smiled, extending his hand to help me from the car. His palm was warm and dry against mine. Thank you for coming. It's quite a place, I said, unable to keep the awe from my voice as I looked up at the mansion. It's home, he replied simply, guiding me inside with a light touch at the small of my back. The interior was just as impressive. Soaring ceilings, marble floors, art that looked museum-worthy. But there was warmth, too. Unexpected touches like worn leather sofas and framed children's artwork that spoke of a real home, not just a showcase. Isabella is waiting in the garden, Victor said, leading me through the house. She's been talking about you nonstop since yesterday. Something in his voice made me glance up at him. You really care about her. His expression softened. She is everything to me. We stepped through French doors onto a stone terrace. Beyond, elaborate gardens stretched toward the cliff edge, where the property met the sea. Isabella sat at a wrought iron table, swinging her legs that didn't quite reach the ground. Beside her, a slender older woman watched with a pinched expression as Isabella colored in a picture book. When she saw me, Isabella's face lit up, and she jumped from her chair, rushing toward me. You came, she signed excitedly, bouncing on her toes. I smiled, signing back. Of course. I said I would. The older woman, who I assumed was Mrs. Parker, the current tutor, regarded me with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Victor made the introductions, and I shook her hand, noticing how her eyes darted between Victor and me, something calculating in her gaze. Lunch was served on the terrace, chicken nuggets shaped like dinosaurs for Isabella, a light seafood salad for the adults. The conversation flowed more easily than I expected, with Isabella eagerly acting as a bridge between Mrs. Parker and me, her signing simple but expressive. Miss Bennett, Mrs. Parker said during a lull, I understand you're quite new to Harborview. Just 3 months, I confirmed. And you've come alone? No family in the area? Her tone was conversational, but her eyes were sharp. No, it's just me. My parents are in Ohio, and my brother's in Seattle. Brave girl, she murmured. Moving to a new place where you know no one. Victor, who had been relatively quiet, watching our exchange, finally spoke. Mrs. Parker, perhaps you could show Isabella the new picture books you mentioned earlier. I'd like to speak with Miss Bennett about the potential tutoring arrangement. The older woman's lips thinned, but she nodded, gesturing for Isabella to follow her. Isabella looked disappointed but obeyed, throwing me a quick sign before leaving. Don't let him scare you. He looks mean, but he's not. Once we were alone, Victor refilled my water glass. What do you think of my daughter, Kate? She's remarkable, I answered honestly. Intelligent, curious, frustrated by her limitations. Or rather, the limitations others place on her. She's clearly starved for proper communication. He nodded slowly. And what do you think of me? The question caught me off guard. I don't know you, I hedged. But you've heard things, I'm sure. His eyes held mine, unflinching. Everyone in Harborview has. I swallowed hard. I try not to listen to gossip. Wise, he said, a hint of a smile playing at his lips. But in this case, some of it might be true. He leaned forward slightly. I am a businessman, Kate. Sometimes my business requires firm decisions. I have enemies. That's why Isabella lives such a sheltered life. She seems lonely, I ventured. She is. The admission seemed to cost him something. After her mother died, I became, perhaps, overly protective. How did her mother die? I asked before I could stop myself. His expression darkened. A car accident. When Isabella was 3, the same accident that took her hearing. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. That must have been devastating for both of you. It was. He was silent for a moment, then continued. Isabella has had a series of tutors, companions, security personnel, but no one who truly connects with her. Until yesterday, when she met you. And I shifted uncomfortably under his intense gaze. Mr. Moretti. Victor, please. Victor, I amended, the name feeling strange on my tongue. I'm just an elementary school teacher. I'm not sure I'm qualified to... You're exactly what she needs, he interrupted. Someone who sees her, not her disability, not her last name, just her. The conviction in his voice was startling. And what about you? What do you need? The question hung between us, loaded with implications I hadn't intended. Victor's eyes darkened, and for a moment, the controlled businessman facade slipped, revealing something raw underneath. Peace of mind, he finally said. Knowing my daughter is happy, that she can communicate with someone who understands her world. I didn't entirely believe him, but I nodded. If I were to agree, we'd need clear boundaries, professional boundaries. Of course. His tone was smooth again, unreadable. I would come twice a week, as you suggested. Tuesdays and Thursdays. 2 hours each session. We would focus on age-appropriate ASL, reading skills, and building her confidence in communication. And your compensation? I named a figure slightly higher than my usual tutoring rate. Victor's eyebrow rose. Double it, he said dismissively. And I'll provide transportation to and from your apartment. I blinked, thrown by his generosity and the casual display of wealth. That's not necessary. It is to me. His tone brooked no argument. Isabella's safety is paramount, and by extension, now yours is too. A chill ran down my spine. What does that mean? Victor's expression was grave. It means that once you enter our lives, Kate Bennett, certain precautions become necessary. There are people who would use any connection to me or my family as leverage. You're scaring me, I admitted. Good, he said simply. Fear keeps people alert, but don't worry. No harm will come to you under my protection. Under his protection. The phrase echoed in my mind, both reassuring and alarming. I was about to respond when Isabella burst back onto the terrace, her face animated as she signed rapidly to her father. Can I show Kate my room, please? I want to show her my dollhouse. Victor's stern expression melted at his daughter's enthusiasm. If Miss Bennett has time, he replied, signing along with his words. though his movements were still awkward compared to Isabella's fluid grace. "I'd love to see it." I signed directly to Isabella, whose smile widened. She grabbed my hand, pulling me to my feet with surprising strength for such a small child. Victor watched us, something unreadable in his expression, as his daughter led me away. Isabella's bedroom was a little girl's paradise. A canopy bed with twinkling fairy lights, bookshelves filled with colorfully illustrated stories, and a dollhouse that was an exact replica of the mansion itself. Stuffed animals occupied every available surface, and a violin case rested carefully on a special stand. "This is my favorite," she signed, showing me a worn teddy bear. "His name is Mr. Whiskers. He's deaf like me." "Nice to meet you, Mr. Whiskers," I signed solemnly, shaking the bear's paw. Isabella giggled silently. "Daddy got me the dollhouse for my birthday. Look, there's even a tiny me." She pointed to a small doll with dark pigtails sitting at a miniature piano. "Do you play piano too?" I asked, noticing the music theme. Her face clouded slightly. "Mommy played piano. I play violin because I can feel the vibrations here." She touched her chest. "Daddy says music is in our hearts, not just our ears." The simple wisdom of her words caught me off guard. I was about to respond when I realized we weren't alone. Victor stood in the doorway, watching us with that same intense gaze. How long had he been there? Isabella noticed him too and signed something that made him chuckle, a deep, warm sound that transformed his face. "What did she say?" I asked. "She said I'm hovering like a helicopter," he translated, moving into the room. "Perhaps I am." "Daddy's afraid you'll run away if he doesn't watch you every second," Isabella signed cheekily. I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, signing simultaneously. "At least not until we finish exploring this amazing dollhouse." Victor's phone buzzed, and his expression darkened as he read the message. "I'm afraid I need to take care of something," he said, his tone shifting to something colder. "Isabella, show Kate around if she likes. I'll join you shortly." He left with purposeful strides, already dialing a number. Isabella rolled her eyes. "Daddy's phone is always ringing," she signed with the dramatic exasperation only a child could muster. "Always working, working, working. Important man?" I signed back, raising my eyebrows questioningly. She hesitated, then signed, "Scary man to bad people, but good daddy to me." I nodded, unsure how to respond to that honest assessment. Isabella's hands moved again. "So, will you be my teacher?" Looking into her hopeful eyes, I knew I couldn't refuse. Despite the warnings, despite the rumors about her father, despite my own better judgment, I nodded. "Yes," I signed. "I'll be your teacher." Her joy was radiant, and she threw her arms around me in an impulsive hug. Over her shoulder, I saw Victor had returned to the doorway. Our eyes met, and something passed between us, an understanding, an acknowledgement of the invisible thread that now connected us. I had just entered the Moretti world. I had no idea how deeply I would become entangled in it, or how impossible it would become to leave. That Tuesday, I arrived for my first official session with Isabella. Ray picked me up in the now familiar Bentley, and I noticed something different, a small but unmistakable bulge beneath his jacket, a gun. The realization sent ice through my veins, making the dangers Victor had hinted at suddenly very real. At the mansion, Isabella waited eagerly in a sunny room that had been set up as a child-friendly learning space, complete with a small table and chairs, colorful posters of the ASL alphabet, and shelves of picture books. For 2 hours, we worked on storytelling in ASL, acting out The Three Little Wolves and the Big Bad Pig, a twist on the classic that had Isabella dissolving into silent giggles. Victor appeared briefly, watching our interaction with evident satisfaction before excusing himself for business calls. As Ray drove me home afterward, I noticed him taking an unusual route, doubling back several times. When I questioned him, his answer was chilling. "Making sure we're not followed, Miss Bennett." Standard procedure. I sank back into the leather seat, reality crashing down around me. What had I gotten myself into, and why, despite everything, was I so eager to return on Thursday to see those small hands fly in conversation and that innocent face light up with understanding? The weeks fell into a rhythm. Twice a week, Ray would collect me in the Bentley, and for 2 precious hours, Isabella and I would dive into a world of language and imagination. She was a brilliant child, eager to learn, quick to grasp new concepts, endlessly curious. We moved beyond formal lessons into genuine friendship, our hands flying in conversations that ranged from fairy tales to the names she'd given all 27 of her stuffed animals. Victor remained an enigmatic presence on the periphery of these sessions. Sometimes he would observe silently from the doorway. Other times he would join us briefly, his signing improving steadily under his daughter's patient coaching. "No, Daddy, your fingers go like this," she would correct him, manipulating his much larger hands with her tiny ones. Occasionally, he would be absent entirely, away on business trips that Isabella referred to cryptically as grown-up stuff. After each lesson, there would be dinner. Chicken fingers and carrot sticks cut into stars for Isabella, elaborate meals for the adults served in the formal dining room where I felt perpetually underdressed, despite upgrading my wardrobe with my generous tutoring fees. Victor always insisted I stay, and I found it increasingly difficult to refuse, not because I feared his reaction, but because I craved these glimpses into their world. Isabella's animated stories, the rare moments when Victor's guard lowered, and I caught glimpses of the man beneath the fearsome reputation. It was during the 3rd week that things began to shift. I was teaching Isabella about poetry in ASL, how rhythm and movement could make a simple nursery rhyme come alive. When I felt Victor's presence, I glanced up to find him watching us from the doorway, his expression unusually soft. "Don't stop on my account," he said, entering the room. "It's beautiful to watch." Isabella beamed at her father's praise. "Kate is teaching me to sign Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," she explained, her fingers dancing through the air. Victor took a seat across from us. "Show me," he requested. I hesitated, suddenly self-conscious. "It's meant for children. Please," he insisted gently. Taking a deep breath, I began to sign the simple rhyme, my movements flowing from one phrase to the next, fingers twinkling like stars, hands rising and falling with the melody that Isabella could not hear but could feel, through the rhythm of the signs. When I finished, Isabella clapped her hands excitedly. Victor's eyes hadn't left my face. "Remarkable," he murmured. "I've never seen signing as art before." Something warm unfurled in my chest at his words. "It is art," I said. "One of the most expressive languages in the world, even for something as simple as a nursery rhyme." "You've given my daughter a gift," he said, his voice low and intense. "One I could never provide." Isabella glanced between us, a small smile playing at her lips. "I need to go potty," she signed with the directness of a child, and slipped from the room before either of us could respond. Alone with Victor, I became acutely aware of the space between us, the heavy silence, the way his eyes held mine. "Your daughter is extraordinary," I said, to break the tension. "Yes," he agreed. "She takes after her mother in that way." Juliana was luminous. It was the first time he'd mentioned his late wife by name. "You must miss her very much." A shadow crossed his face. "Every day. But especially when I see how Isabella struggles in a world that doesn't understand her." He leaned forward slightly. "Until you came along." "I'm just doing my job," I said, though we both knew it had become more than that. "No," he countered. "You've become important to her, to both of us." My heart stuttered. "Victor." "Have dinner with me," he interrupted. "Not here, not with Isabella, just the 2 of us." "I don't think that's appropriate," I said carefully. "I work for you." "Is that all this is?" His voice was soft but penetrating. "A professional relationship?" I stood abruptly, gathering my teaching materials. "It has to be, for Isabella's sake if nothing else." Victor rose too, moving with that fluid grace that belied his size. "Kate," he said, close enough now that I could smell his cologne. "We both know this isn't just about Isabella anymore." Before I could respond, Isabella bounced back into the room, holding a picture book she wanted to show me. The moment passed, but something had shifted. A line had been drawn, and I wasn't sure how long either of us would respect it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my small apartment, replaying Victor's words, the intensity in his eyes. What was I doing? Getting involved with Victor Moretti was dangerous in ways I couldn't even comprehend. I was just a teacher from Ohio, out of my depth in a world of power and secrets. My phone buzzed with a text, unknown number. Think about what I said. V. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the delete button. Instead, I saved the number to my contacts. The next morning at school, I was distracted, earning curious looks from my young students as I fumbled through lessons I usually taught with confidence. During my lunch break, I retreated to the faculty lounge, hoping a cup of terrible coffee would clear my head. "Miss Bennett?" I looked up to find Principal Harris in the doorway, his expression uncomfortable. "Could I see you in my office?" My stomach dropped. Had someone seen me getting into Victor's car? Was my tutoring job somehow against school policy? In his office, Principal Harris closed the door carefully before speaking. "I received a call this morning, from Victor Moretti." I froze. "What?" "He's made a substantial donation to our special education department, specifically for ASL resources." Harris adjusted his glasses nervously. "He mentioned your name, said you'd inspired him to support deaf education." Relief washed over me, followed by confusion. "I didn't know anything about this. $100,000, Miss Bennett." Harris looked both impressed and terrified. "With the stipulation that you oversee how it's spent." I sat back, stunned. "I don't understand." "Mr. Moretti is an influential man in this community," Harris said carefully. "If he's taken an interest in our ASL program, in you, I strongly suggest you accept this opportunity." The implication was clear. Don't cross Victor Moretti. Even here, in what I'd thought was my separate, safe world, his influence reached. I nodded numbly and left the office, my thoughts in turmoil. Outside, the parking lot was filled with children enjoying their lunch break in the autumn sunshine. Among the minivans and sensible SUVs, a sleek black Maserati stood out like a panther among house cats. Leaning against it, arms crossed, was Victor. My heart jumped to my throat as I approached him. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to see where you work," he said simply, his eyes taking in the modest brick building behind me. "I hope you don't mind about the donation. Isabella mentioned your classroom needed better resources." $100,000, Victor. I kept my voice low, aware of the curious stares from passing students. "That's not a donation. It's a what, Kate?" His voice held a dangerous edge. I swallowed hard. "A gesture I don't know how to interpret." His expression softened marginally. "Then let me be clear. I want to support your work here because it matters to Isabella, and because it matters to you." "And last night?" I challenged. "What was that about?" Victor glanced around, then opened the passenger door of his car. "Get in. Please. Just for a moment." Against my better judgment, I slid into the butter-soft leather seat. Victor joined me, closing the door to seal us in a bubble of privacy, the tinted windows shielding us from prying eyes. "Last night," he began, his voice low and intent, "was about the fact that I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since the moment you knelt to help my daughter in that cafe." He turned to face me fully. "I know it's complicated. I know who I am makes it even more so. But I'm not a man who denies himself what he wants, Kate." My pulse raced. "And you want me?" "Yes." The single word held such conviction it stole my breath. "But I need you to want this too, freely, without pressure." I laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. "How is that possible? You're my employer. You've just donated a fortune to my school. The power imbalance here is—" "Then quit," he interrupted. "Stop tutoring Isabella. I'll withdraw the donation, level the playing field. And hurt your daughter in the process?" I shook my head. "I won't do that." Victor studied me, something like admiration in his gaze. "That's why I—" He stopped himself. "That's why you're different. You put her first." The air between us felt charged, heavy with unspoken words. Victor reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from my face with surprising gentleness. "One dinner," he said softly, "away from Harborview, where no one knows us. No expectations, no pressure. Just dinner." I should have said no. Everything in me knew that crossing this line would change my life irrevocably. But the truth was, It had already changed the moment I'd knelt to help Isabella with those fallen bookmarks. One dinner, I agreed. But I drive myself, and Isabella can never know. A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his features. Friday. I'll text you the details. I nodded and reached for the door handle. Before I could exit, Victor's hand covered mine. Kate, he said, his voice a low rumble. Thank you. For what? I wasn't sure. For agreeing to dinner? For tutoring his daughter? For seeing him as more than the dangerous man everyone whispered about? Perhaps all of those things. I slipped out of the car and hurried back toward the school building, feeling his eyes on me until I disappeared inside. Friday arrived with a mixture of anticipation and dread churning in my stomach. Victor's text had been cryptic. An address in Portland, an hour away, and a time, 8 p.m. I'd agonized over what to wear before settling on a simple black dress that had hung unworn in my closet since graduate school. The drive to Portland gave me time to reconsider, to turn around, to make the sensible choice. I didn't. The address led me to a discreet restaurant tucked away on a side street, the kind of place with no sign, just a numbered door and a well-dressed doorman who asked for my name. Catherine Bennett, I said, using my full name, wondering if I'd be on the list. The doorman nodded immediately. Mr. Moretti is waiting for you. The interior was intimate. Dark wood, soft lighting, well-spaced tables ensuring privacy. Victor rose as I approached, and for a moment I saw him through fresh eyes. Away from his mansion, away from his security detail, dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, he looked less like a Mafia boss and more like what he pretended to be. A successful businessman with old-world charm. You came, he said, taking my hand and pressing a kiss to my knuckles in a gesture that would have seemed affected from anyone else. I said I would. I slid into the seat he held for me. Though I'm still not sure this is a good idea. The best ideas rarely are. Victor signaled for wine. You look beautiful, Kate. The evening unfolded with surprising ease. Victor was an attentive listener, drawing out stories of my childhood in Ohio, my deaf uncle who'd inspired my career, my dreams for the future. In turn, he shared carefully edited tales of growing up in a traditional Italian family in Boston, his early business ventures, the whirlwind romance with Juliana. She was a concert pianist, he told me, swirling the ruby liquid in his glass. The first time I saw her, she was playing Chopin at a charity event I had no interest in attending. I stayed until the very end, just to meet her. How romantic, I said, meaning it. I was a different man then, Victor admitted. Younger, more impetuous. And now? His eyes met mine over the rim of his glass. Now I know exactly what I want, and I'm willing to wait for it. The implications of his words hung between us, charged with possibility. Our conversation drifted to safer topics. Isabella's progress, her upcoming 7th birthday, her dream of getting a puppy that Victor was reluctant to fulfill. I told her maybe when she's older, he sighed. She signed back that I always say that about everything. I laughed. She has your stubbornness, that's for sure. By the time dessert arrived, I had almost forgotten who he was, what he did, the warnings that followed his name like shadows. Almost. Until his phone buzzed, and the mask slipped. He glanced at the screen, and his expression hardened into something cold and dangerous. "Excuse me for a moment," he said, his voice tight as he rose from the table. I watched him step outside, his back rigid, gesturing sharply as he spoke to someone on the phone. Through the window, I could see the transformation, from the charming dinner companion to the man whose name made people lower their voices in fear. When he returned, the chill hadn't entirely left his eyes. "I apologize for the interruption," he said, his accent thicker than before. "Business that couldn't wait." "Is everything all right?" I asked cautiously. "It will be." The certainty in his tone sent a shiver down my spine. "Don't worry." But I did worry. In that moment, reality crashed back. Who he was, who I was, the gulf between our worlds. "I should go," I said, placing my napkin beside my half-eaten dessert. Victor studied me. "It's getting late," understanding dawning in his eyes. "You saw it, didn't you? The other side of me." I didn't deny it. "I'm not naive, Victor. I know your business isn't just real estate. And does that frighten you? He asked, his voice soft but intense. Yes, I admitted. It should frighten anyone with sense. He reached across the table, taking my hand in his. His palm was warm, strong, the fingers that traced circles on my wrist both gentle and possessive. I would never let that part of my life touch you, Kate. Or Isabella. Everything I do to keep us safe. Us. As if I was already part of his carefully guarded inner circle. I need to think, I said, pulling my hand away. This is complicated. Victor nodded, accepting my retreat with surprising grace. I understand. Take all the time you need. He signaled for the check. May I at least walk you to your car? Outside, the night air was crisp with approaching winter. Victor placed his jacket around my shoulders, the fabric still warm from his body, his scent enveloping me. We walked in silence to my car, parked a block away. Thank you for dinner, I said, fumbling with my keys, suddenly nervous. Kate. Victor's voice stopped me. He stepped closer, one hand coming up to cup my cheek, his touch feather-light. I meant what I said. Take all the time you need, but know this. I am not a patient man by nature. For you, I'm trying to be. Before I could respond, he leaned down and brushed his lips against mine. A kiss so gentle it was barely there. Yet it burned through me like fire. Then he stepped back, his expression unreadable in the dim street lighting. Drive safely, he murmured, and turned to walk away. I drove home in a daze, my lips still tingling, my thoughts a chaotic tangle of desire and doubt. What was I doing? Getting involved with Victor Moretti was like stepping willingly into quicksand. Each move only pulled me deeper. As I approached my apartment building, a flicker of unease traveled down my spine. Something felt wrong. The street was quieter than usual, the shadows deeper. I parked and hurried to the entrance, keys clutched in my hand like a weapon. The feeling intensified as I climbed the stairs to my third-floor apartment. The hallway was silent, but I couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. With trembling fingers, I unlocked my door and stepped inside, immediately reaching for the light switch. Nothing happened. The power was out. Heart pounding, I fumbled for my phone, activating the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating my living room, and the man sitting calmly in my reading chair. "Hello, Miss Bennett," he said, his voice carrying a faint accent different from Victor's. "We need to talk about your new friend." I froze, my phone slipping from suddenly nerveless fingers. The light spun wildly across the floor before settling at an angle that cast long, distorted shadows across the walls. The man remained seated, seemingly unconcerned by my presence or my fear. "Who are you?" My voice emerged as a whisper. "What do you want?" He leaned forward, catching the edge of the light. I could make out an expensive suit, a lean face with sharp features, dark eyes that assessed me coolly. "My name is Alessio Ricci. As for what I want, information, Miss Bennett, about Victor Moretti." My hand inched toward my purse, where my pepper spray hung from the side pocket. "I don't know anything." "Please." Disdain dripped from the word. "We've been watching you. The devoted teacher who spends evenings at the Moretti estate, who drives to Portland for private dinners with Victor." He made a tisking sound. "You know more than most. If you've been watching me, then you know Victor's people are probably watching too." I tried to keep my voice steady, grasping for confidence I didn't feel. "They'll be here any minute." Alessio smiled thinly. "No, they won't. Victor's security detail is currently occupied with an incident across town. Quite unfortunate timing for you." A chill ran through me. This had been planned, coordinated. "What do you want from me?" I repeated, my mind racing. "To deliver a message," Alessio said, rising to his feet with fluid grace. He was taller than I'd initially thought, moving with the same predatory confidence I'd observed in Victor. "Victor Moretti has taken something that belongs to me. I want it back." "I don't know what you're talking about." "No?" He moved closer, and I stumbled back against the door. "The shipping containers from the port of Newark. The ones he intercepted last month. Tell him I want my property returned, or there will be consequences." "I'm just his daughter's tutor," I insisted, panic rising in my throat. "I don't know anything about his business." Alessio's hand shot out, gripping my chin with surprising strength. forcing me to look at him. Then perhaps you should ask yourself what kind of man you're getting involved with, Miss Bennet. What kind of world you're stepping into. His fingers tightened painfully. Victor Moretti is not what he seems. Neither are you, I managed, jerking my face away from his grasp. Breaking into a woman's apartment, threatening her. What kind of man does that make you? Something flashed in his eyes, anger, perhaps respect. A practical one. He stepped back, straightening his already immaculate suit. You have 48 hours to deliver my message. After that, our next conversation won't be nearly so pleasant. And if I go to the police? He laughed, the sound devoid of humor. By all means, I'm sure they'd be very interested in learning about Victor's businesses, and yours. I don't have a business, I protested. No? Taking money from known criminals doesn't count? Alessio raised an eyebrow. The hefty deposit in your bank account might suggest otherwise to the authorities. My mouth went dry. The tutoring money. 48 hours, he repeated, moving toward the balcony door I hadn't even realized was open. Oh, and Miss Bennet? I wouldn't mention this conversation to Victor just yet. Men like us tend to overreact when our possessions are threatened. With that, he slipped out into the night, leaving me trembling in my darkened apartment. I spent the next hour checking locks, peering out windows, jumping at every sound. Eventually, the power flickered back on, cut deliberately, I now realized, to facilitate Alessio's entrance. I considered calling the police, but what would I say? That a man had threatened me on behalf of a rival criminal organization? That I was somehow caught between warring factions I knew nothing about? Instead, I called the one person I could think of. Ray, I said when he answered. It's Kate Bennet. I need to talk to Victor. There was a pause. It's nearly midnight, Miss Bennet. It's important, I insisted. Please. Another pause. I'll see if he's available. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Kate? Victor's voice was alert, concerned. What's wrong? I opened my mouth to tell him everything, then hesitated, remembering Alessio's warning. I think someone broke into my apartment. Are you hurt? The question was sharp, urgent. No, I'm fine. Nothing seems to be missing. The power was out when I got home, but it's back on now. I'm sending Ray to you. Right now. Pack a bag. What? No, I don't. This isn't a discussion. Victor cut me off, his tone brooking no argument. You're not staying there tonight, or any night until I've had the place secured. Victor, that's not necessary. Kate. My name was a command, a plea. Please. I closed my eyes, torn between relief at not having to spend the night alone and fear of being drawn deeper into Victor's world. Where would I go? To the house. We have plenty of room. His voice softened. Isabella will be delighted to have you so close. Isabella. I hadn't even considered how this might affect her, how my growing involvement with her father might change our relationship. Okay, I agreed finally. Just for tonight. Ray will be there in 20 minutes. True to his word, Ray arrived promptly, his expression grim as he escorted me to the waiting car, eyes constantly scanning the street. This time, I noticed the gun openly holstered beneath his jacket. Mr. Moretti is waiting for you, he said as we pulled away from my apartment building. The drive to the Moretti estate passed in tense silence. I stared out the window at the darkened landscape, wondering how my life had changed so dramatically in such a short time. 6 weeks ago, I'd been a normal elementary school teacher, my biggest concern whether my students would master fingerspelling. Now, I was being whisked away in the middle of the night by a Mafia boss's security detail after being threatened by his rival. Victor met us at the door, his face tight with controlled anger. Are you all right? He asked, taking my overnight bag from Ray and dismissing him with a nod. I'm fine, I insisted, just rattled. He guided me inside with a gentle hand at the small of my back. The house was quiet, most of the lights dimmed for the night. Everyone's asleep, he explained, leading me upstairs. Including Isabella. We can talk in my study. Victor's private study was exactly as I'd imagined it, leather-bound books, a massive desk of polished mahogany, the faint scent of cigars and whiskey hanging in the air. He poured 2 drinks from a crystal decanter, pressing one into my hand. "Tell me exactly what happened," he said, his voice controlled, but with an undercurrent of danger. I took a sip of the amber liquid, welcoming the burn. "Not much to tell. I came home, the power was out, and I felt like something was wrong." I hesitated, then opted for a half-truth. "I think someone had been in my apartment, but they were gone by the time I arrived." Victor studied me, his eyes dark and penetrating. "You're not telling me everything." "I'm tired," I deflected. "It's been a long day." He took a step closer, one hand coming up to cup my cheek. "Kate," he said softly, "if someone threatened you because of your connection to me, I need to know." I pulled away, moving to the window that overlooked the moonlit gardens. "What exactly do you do, Victor? And don't say real estate." There was a long silence. When I turned back, his expression had closed, becoming the mask I recognized from our first meeting. "My business is complicated," he said carefully. "Is it illegal?" Another pause. "Some aspects exist in gray areas." "Gray enough that men might break into my apartment?" I challenged. "Gray enough that your 7-year-old daughter needs armed guards to go to the park?" "The world is dangerous, Kate," Victor said, his voice hardening. "I do what's necessary to protect what's mine." "I'm not yours," I shot back. Something flashed in his eyes. Possessiveness, determination. "Aren't you?" The question hung between us, loaded with implications. Before I could respond, Victor closed the distance between us in 2 swift strides. This time, there was nothing gentle about his kiss. It was demanding, consuming, his hands tangling in my hair, his body pressing mine against the window. And God help me, I kissed him back with equal fervor. Weeks of tension and attraction exploding between us. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victor rested his forehead against mine. "I want you to stay," he murmured. "Not just tonight. Here, with us, where I can keep you safe." "I can't just abandon my life," I protested, though the words lacked conviction. "My job, my apartment. Why not?" His hands framed my face, his gaze intense. "What's keeping you there, Kate? A rented apartment? A job where you're underpaid and underappreciated?" "It's my life," I insisted. "I built it myself." "Build a new one," Victor urged. "Here, with Isabella." A pause. "With me." The offer was tempting, more than tempting, but something held me back. "I need to know the truth first, about what you do, about who you are." Victor stepped away, running a hand through his hair in a rare gesture of frustration. "Some truths are dangerous, Kate." "So is ignorance," I countered. "I'm already involved, whether you tell me or not. I deserve to know what I'm walking into." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. "Very well. But not tonight. Tomorrow, after you've rested. I'll show you what you want to know." It was more than I'd expected. "Thank you." Victor led me to a guest suite down the hall from Isabella's room, a luxurious space with a 4-poster bed and an adjoining bathroom bigger than my entire apartment. "Try to sleep," he said, lingering in the doorway. "We'll talk in the morning." After he left, I sat on the edge of the bed, my head spinning. 48 hours, Alessio had said. I had until tomorrow night to deliver his message. And tomorrow, Victor would show me the truth about his business. A truth I both craved and dreaded. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by dreams of shadowed men and veiled threats. I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the sound of eager knocking at my door. "Come in," I called, sitting up and pushing tangled hair from my face. Isabella burst in, still in her pajamas, pink with unicorns, clutching Mr. Whiskers. Her face was alight with surprise and joy. "You're here," she signed rapidly. "Did you come for a sleepover?" "Sort of," I signed back, smiling despite my exhaustion. "For a little while." Her small face grew serious. "Daddy said there was a problem at your house." "Nothing serious," I assured her, not wanting to worry her. "Just some grown-up stuff." Isabella didn't look entirely convinced, but her natural enthusiasm quickly reasserted itself. "We can have pancakes. Domingo makes the best pancakes. He puts chocolate chips in them shaped like Mickey Mouse." I laughed. her excitement infectious. Sounds delicious. Let me shower first, okay? After she left, bouncing out as energetically as she'd arrived, I took advantage of the luxurious bathroom, letting hot water wash away the tension of the previous night. By the time I dressed and made my way downstairs, I felt almost normal again, until I entered the dining room and found Victor waiting with Isabella, his expression grave despite his casual attire. "Good morning," he said, rising as I entered. "I hope you slept well." "As well as could be expected," I replied, taking the seat Isabella eagerly patted beside her. Breakfast was a strangely domestic affair: Mickey Mouse pancakes for Isabella, coffee and pastries for the adults. Isabella dominated the conversation, her hands flying as she told me about her plans for the day, her upcoming ballet recital, her dream of having a puppy, bigger than Mr. Whiskers but smaller than a horse. Victor watched us with an expression I couldn't quite read, pride mingled with something more complex. After we finished eating, he touched Isabella's shoulder gently. "Princess, I need to borrow Kate for a while," he signed. "Grown-up business." Isabella pouted but nodded. "Promise you'll play dollhouse with me later?" She signed to me. "Promise." I signed back, touched by how quickly she'd accepted my presence in her home. Once she had left, skipping away to find her nanny, Victor turned to me. "Are you ready?" I took a deep breath. "As I'll ever be." He led me to the garage, a cavernous space housing a collection of luxury vehicles. We took an understated black SUV, with Ray driving and another security man in the passenger seat. No one spoke as we wound through the wooded estate grounds and onto the main road. "Where are we going?" I finally asked. "The harbor," Victor replied. "I want you to see what I really do." We drove to a section of the waterfront I'd never visited, a commercial area with warehouses and shipping containers. Ray pulled up to a nondescript building with a small sign, Moretti Imports. Inside, it looked like any business office: reception desk, conference room, employees at computers. Victor greeted several by name as he led me through to a secure door that required both a keycard and fingerprint scan. "This is the heart of my operation," he said, as the door swung open, revealing a large open space filled with crates and workers in white lab coats. "Pharmaceuticals? Drugs?" I asked, alarmed. "Medicine," Victor corrected. "Life-saving drugs that American pharmaceutical companies price beyond the reach of ordinary people. We import them from countries where they're manufactured at a fraction of the cost." He led me through the facility, explaining the operation: generic cancer drugs from India, insulin from Canada, medications for rare diseases sourced from Europe, all distributed through a network of independent pharmacies at prices far below market rate. "It's not exactly legal," he admitted. "But it's not what you're thinking either. We don't deal in narcotics or addictive substances, just medications people need to survive but can't afford." "Then why all the security? The guns? The rival threatening me in my apartment?" I blurted out, then immediately regretted it. Victor stopped short. "What rival?" His voice had gone dangerously soft. I closed my eyes briefly, realizing my mistake. "Last night," I admitted, "there was someone in my apartment when I got home." "Alessio Ricci." Victor's expression transformed, rage flashing across his features before he controlled it with visible effort. "What did he say to you?" There was no point hiding it now. "He mentioned shipping containers from Newark. Said you took something that belongs to him and he wants it back." I swallowed hard. "He gave me 48 hours to deliver the message. And you didn't tell me this last night because?" "He threatened me," I admitted. "Said not to tell you right away because men like you overreact when your possessions are threatened." Victor's jaw tightened. "You are not my possession," he said fiercely. "But you are under my protection, which means Ricci has made a grave mistake." He turned to Ray, who had been following at a discreet distance. "Get the car and call Dominic. Tell him to secure the house and double the guard on Isabella." My heart raced. "Victor, what's happening? Who is this man?" His eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw real fear there. "Alessio Ricci is dangerous, Kate. More dangerous than you can imagine. And he's using you to get to me." "Why? What's in those containers?" Victor hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Counterfeit medications. Cheap, toxic imitations of life-saving drugs." Ricci has been flooding the market with them, and people have died. We intercepted his shipment last month and turned the evidence over to the FDA. So you're... What? Some kind of pharmaceutical vigilante? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Something like that. My father built this business 30 years ago when my mother couldn't afford her cancer medications. After she died, he expanded, helping others. When he passed, I inherited it all. The legitimate businesses, the import operation, and yes, the less savory methods sometimes needed to protect it. The Mafia connection, I said softly. An oversimplification, but essentially correct. Victor took my hands in his. Kate, I need you to understand something. I've done things I'm not proud of. I've hurt people who threaten my family, my business, my community. But everything I do for a reason. I searched his face, trying to reconcile the man before me with the ruthless criminal Alessio had described. Why are you telling me all this? Because I want you in my life, he said simply. In Isabella's life, and I can't ask that of you without honesty. Before I could respond, Ray appeared, his expression grim. Sir, we need to go, now. There's a situation at the house. Victor's face drained of color. Isabella? She's secure, Ray assured him. But Ricci's men have been spotted on the perimeter. Victor was already moving, pulling me along beside him. Change of plans, he told me grimly. We're not going back to the house, not yet. I'm taking you somewhere safe until this is resolved. What about Isabella? I asked, frightened by the urgency in his movements. Dominic will protect her with his life, Victor assured me. But right now you're the more vulnerable target. As we hurried toward the car, a terrible thought occurred to me. Victor, what if this isn't about the medications at all? What if Ricci is using me to draw you out, away from Isabella? Victor stopped short, his expression changing as he considered my words. He pulled out his phone, dialing rapidly. Dominic, status report on Isabella. A pause. Put her on. Another pause. No, I need to speak to her directly. His face went rigid. What do you mean she went to the music room? She's supposed to be with Mrs. Lawrence. The world seemed to slow as Victor lowered the phone, his eyes meeting mine with naked fear. She's gone. The next hour passed in a blur of controlled chaos. Victor transformed before my eyes, his movements precise and lethal as he issued rapid-fire commands into his phone. The security team converged on the SUV, a second vehicle appearing from nowhere, men with guns and earpieces establishing a protective perimeter around us. They've taken Isabella, Victor told me, his voice stripped to its mechanical core. Ricci's men. They breached the east fence line where it meets the cliff. They waited until she went to the music room for her violin practice. The implication hung heavy in the air. There was a traitor somewhere in Victor's organization who knew Isabella's schedule. What do they want? I asked, struggling to keep pace as he guided me through a side entrance of the warehouse to an armored vehicle waiting in a loading bay. Me? Victor answered grimly. Or rather, my territory. Ricci's been trying to expand his operation for years. Isabella is leverage. Oh God. My legs threatened to buckle beneath me. Sweet, innocent Isabella in the hands of men like Alessio Ricci. The image of that small child, unable to hear the danger around her, terrified and confused, was unbearable. Victor's hand gripped my elbow, steadying me. I'm going to get her back, he said with absolute conviction. But I need to know you're safe first. I'm coming with you, I insisted. Absolutely not. Victor. I grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at me. Isabella trusts me. She can't hear what's happening around her. She'll be terrified, disoriented. She needs a familiar face, someone who can communicate with her. His jaw worked as he considered my words. It's too dangerous. I'm already in danger, I countered. Let me help. She's just a little girl, Victor. She needs me. For a moment, I thought he would refuse. Then something shifted in his expression. Respect, resignation, determination. Stay close to me, he finally said. Do exactly as I tell you. If this goes wrong, it won't, I interrupted, with more confidence than I felt. Victor studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. Ray, change of plans. Miss Bennett is coming with us. Get her a vest. Minutes later, I found myself in a bulletproof vest that felt impossibly heavy, wedged between Victor and Ray in the backseat of the armored SUV. Victor's phone rang, and he answered immediately, putting it on speaker. "Moretti." Alessio's smooth voice filled the car. "I believe I have something precious of yours." Victor's knuckles whitened around the phone, but his voice remained controlled. "If you harm her, Ricci, I swear to God." "Your daughter is perfectly fine," Alessio cut him off. "For now. Frightened naturally, but unharmed. She's quite brave for such a little thing, hasn't cried once, though I doubt she understands what's happening." "What do you want?" Victor demanded. "A fair exchange. Your daughter for my shipment, plus a guarantee that you'll stay out of my territory, including the distribution networks you've been interfering with." "Where?" "The old cannery at the North Pier. 1 hour. Come alone." Victor laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "You know that's not going to happen, Ricci." "Fine. Bring your usual security detail, but no police, no FBI contacts. I know you have them." A pause. "And bring the teacher. Your daughter keeps making these hand gestures we can't understand. Very frustrating for everyone involved." My blood ran cold. Victor's eyes met mine, his expression murderous. "If either of them is harmed," Victor said, his voice deadly quiet, "there won't be a place on this earth where you can hide from me." 1 hour, Alessio repeated and hung up. The car accelerated, merging onto the coastal highway. Victor turned to me, his expression grave. "This changes everything. He's using both of you now. At least we know Isabella is all right," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "For now." Victor's face was like granite. "Kate, I need to prepare you for what's about to happen. These men are dangerous. They won't hesitate to use you against me." "I understand," I said, though in truth I couldn't begin to comprehend the world I'd stumbled into. Victor took my hand, his grip firm. "When we get there, stay behind me at all times. If something happens to me, Ray will get you and Isabella out. No matter what you see or hear, your only priority is getting my daughter to safety." "What about you?" His smile was grim. "I can take care of myself." For the next 30 minutes, Victor transformed the SUV into a mobile command center, conferring with his security team, reviewing blueprints of the abandoned cannery, checking weapons with practiced efficiency. I watched in stunned silence, seeing a side of him I'd only glimpsed before, the tactician, the leader, the man who commanded fear and respect in equal measure. 5 minutes out, Ray announced as we turned onto a deserted industrial road that wound along the coastline. Victor tucked a gun into his waistband, then turned to me. "Last chance to stay in the car," he offered. I shook my head. "Isabella needs me." Something softened in his eyes. He reached out, cupping my face in his hands. "When this is over," he said quietly, "we need to have a serious conversation about your safety and your future." "When this is over," I agreed. The cannery loomed ahead, a hulking silhouette against the darkening sky. 3 black SUVs were already parked outside, men in dark suits standing guard. Our vehicle stopped a careful distance away. "Remember," Victor said as we prepared to exit, "stay behind me. Keep your vest on. If I tell you to run, you run." I nodded, my heart pounding against my ribs. The interior of the cannery was cavernous and dimly lit, the air thick with the lingering smell of fish and sea salt. Our footsteps echoed on the concrete floor as Victor led me forward, his security team fanning out behind us. Ahead, a group of men stood waiting, Alessio Ricci at their center, and beside him, Isabella. She looked tiny and frightened, clutching Mr. Whiskers to her chest. Her dark hair had come loose from its pigtails, and tear tracks stained her cheeks, but she was standing straight, her chin raised in a gesture so like her father's that my heart clenched. When she saw me, her eyes widened, her free hand instinctively lifting to sign before one of Ricci's men gripped her arm, stopping her. "Welcome," Alessio called, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Right on time. As always, Victor. Let her go," Victor replied, his voice carrying in the empty space. "This is between us." "Indeed it is," Alessio agreed. "Business, as they say, nothing personal." His gaze shifted to me. "Miss Bennett, how nice to see you again under better circumstances." Victor's body tensed beside me. "You have my word," that you'll get your shipment back," he said, ignoring the pleasantries. "Now release my daughter, and Miss Bennett can take her to the car." Alessio pretended to consider this. "I don't think so. Not yet." He gestured, and one of his men stepped forward, dragging Isabella with him. "First, I need to ensure the shipment is intact, and that your promise to stay out of my territory is sincere." "You have my word," Victor said, his voice hard. "Forgive me if I require something more tangible." Alessio's smile was cold. "A demonstration of good faith, shall we say?" "What kind of demonstration?" Alessio nodded to the man holding Isabella. "Bring her forward." Isabella stumbled as the man pushed her toward the center of the room, her eyes locked with mine, terrified, but trusting. I took an instinctive step toward her, but Victor's arm shot out, blocking my path. "Not yet," he murmured. "A simple exchange," Alessio said pleasantly. "Your daughter for control of the harbor distribution network, everything from Portsmouth to Kennebunk." "That's half my territory," Victor objected. "Our agreement was for the return of your shipment, nothing more." "The agreement has changed," Alessio shrugged. "Consider it the cost of doing business carelessly." His eyes flicked to me, allowing outsiders into your operation, becoming emotionally entangled. Victor's jaw clenched. "The shipment, nothing more." Alessio sighed dramatically. "I was afraid you'd say that." He made a small gesture, and suddenly a gun was pressed to Isabella's head. She flinched, her eyes wide with terror, clutching her teddy bear so tightly that her knuckles went white. "No!" I cried out, lunging forward only to be restrained by Victor's iron grip. "Last chance, Moretti," Alessio called. "The territory or your daughter. Choose." Time seemed to slow. I watched Victor's face, saw calculation and fury warring in his eyes. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded, not to Alessio, but to someone behind him. "I choose both," he said calmly. And all hell broke loose. Gunfire erupted from the shadows at the back of the cannery. Alessio's men scattered, seeking cover. The man holding Isabella hesitated for a critical second, long enough for Victor to draw his weapon and fire a single, precise shot. The man crumpled, and Isabella stood frozen, her hands pressed over her ears despite her deafness, a reflexive gesture of fear. "Now!" Victor shouted, pushing me forward. "Get Isabella!" I ran, heart pounding, as bullets ricocheted off metal surfaces around me. Isabella saw me coming and reached out, her teddy bear falling forgotten to the floor as she stretched her small hands toward mine. I caught her, pulled her against me, and turned to retreat, only to find our path blocked by Alessio himself, gun drawn. "Not so fast," he snarled, all pretense of civility gone. "Let them go, Ricci." Victor's voice came from behind me, deadly calm. "It's over. Your men are surrounded." Alessio's eyes darted around, taking in the situation. His men were indeed outgunned, many already subdued by Victor's security team. But he still had his weapon trained on us. "It's never over," he spat. "Not while I'm still standing." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Alessio's finger tightened on the trigger. Victor shouted a warning. I turned, shielding Isabella with my body, bracing for the impact of a bullet that never came. Instead, there was a different sound, a sickening thud followed by a strangled gasp. I looked up to see Alessio staggering backward, blood blooming across his chest. Behind him stood Mrs. Parker, Isabella's elderly tutor, a smoking gun in her trembling hand. "No one threatens my student," she said with surprising steel in her voice. Victor was beside us in an instant, gathering Isabella into his arms while keeping me tucked against his side. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, eyes scanning both of us for injuries. Isabella shook her head, tears streaming silently down her face. Her small hands flew in frantic signing. "Daddy, Mrs. Parker has a gun." "I know, Princess," Victor replied, signing awkwardly with one hand still holding his own weapon. "She's one of us." I stared at the elderly woman in disbelief. "You work for Victor?" Mrs. Parker straightened her cardigan primly. 27 years, she confirmed. "Before I taught languages, I had a different career entirely." There was no time to process this revelation. Victor was already moving us toward the exit, his security team forming a protective circle around us. "We need to go," he insisted, carrying Isabella, who clung to him like a koala, her face buried against his neck. "The police will be here soon." Outside, the fading daylight seemed impossibly bright after the dim cannery. Victor helped Isabella into the waiting SUV, her small body trembling with delayed shock. As he settled her in the back seat, I retrieved Mr. Whiskers from where he'd fallen, brushing concrete dust from his fur before handing him to Isabella, who clutched him desperately. "Are you all right?" Victor asked me, his hands gentle as they checked me for injuries. "I think so," I managed, though my legs felt like water and my heart was still racing. "Is it over?" "Yes," he promised, pulling me close for a moment. "It's over." In the aftermath, everything moved with dizzying speed. Victor's contacts in law enforcement ensured that the official story painted Alessio Ricci as a pharmaceutical counterfeiter who had kidnapped Isabella in a desperate move after his operation was exposed. His surviving men were arrested, his distribution network dismantled. The truth about Victor's business, about the shootout, about Mrs. Parker's surprising intervention, remained carefully hidden from public view. Isabella recovered from her ordeal with remarkable resilience, though she refused to let Victor or me out of her sight for days. Her nightmares, when they came, were soothed by our joint presence. Victor's strength and my signs communicating safety in the darkness. "The bad men can't get me," she would sign, her small fingers trembling in the moonlight filtering through her bedroom curtains. "Never," I would promise. "Your daddy and I won't let anyone hurt you." "You'll stay?" she would ask each night, her eyes wide and pleading. And each night, I would answer, "I'll stay." As for me, I took a leave of absence from Harborview Elementary, moving temporarily into the Moretti mansion for my protection, though we all knew it had become much more than that. My apartment was cleared out, my meager possessions finding new homes in a suite adjoining Isabella's room. 1 week after the cannery incident, Victor found me in the library, curled in a window seat overlooking the moonlit gardens. Isabella had finally fallen asleep after a particularly difficult night, and I had retreated here to think, to process, to decide. "Can't sleep?" Victor asked softly, joining me on the cushioned bench. I shook my head. "Too much on my mind." "Second thoughts?" His voice was carefully neutral, but I could hear the tension underneath. "Not exactly." I turned to face him fully. "Just trying to reconcile everything. Who you are, what you do, who I am, and what I've become a part of." Victor was silent for a long moment. "I told you once that my business exists in gray areas," he finally said. "That was partially true, but there are parts of it that are undeniably dark, Kate. I won't pretend otherwise. I know. And yet you're still here." "I am," I acknowledged, "for Isabella and for you." His hand found mine in the darkness, our fingers intertwining. "I can't change who I am," he said quietly. "What I've built, the responsibilities I carry, but I can promise you this. You and Isabella will always be protected. Always be my priority." "Is that enough?" I wondered aloud. Living in this world, always looking over our shoulders, always wondering when the next Alessio Ricci might appear? Victor's thumb traced circles on my palm. "I don't know," he admitted. "That's for you to decide." I thought about Isabella, her bravery, her intelligence, her need for someone who could truly understand her. I thought about Victor, the dangerous man with tender hands, the criminal with a moral code, the father who would burn the world to keep his daughter safe. And I thought about myself, the teacher who had walked unknowingly into a Mafia war and somehow found a family in the process. "I want to stay," I said finally, "but I have conditions." Victor's eyebrow rose. "I'm listening." "No more secrets. I want to know everything, about your business, your enemies, the risks we face." He nodded slowly. "All right. Isabella needs as normal a childhood as possible, real school eventually, not just tutors, friends her own age. With proper security," he qualified, though I could see it cost him. "And I go back to teaching," I continued. "Maybe not at Harborview, but somewhere. It's who I am, Victor. I can't lose that." He studied me in the moonlight. "Is that all?" I took a deep breath. "One more thing. If I'm going to be part of this family, really part of it, then I want it official. No more ambiguity. For the first time since I'd met him, Victor Moretti looked genuinely surprised. "Kate Bennett," he said slowly. "Are you proposing to me?" I laughed, the sound breaking the tension between us. "I'm saying that if you were planning to ask, I wouldn't say no." His smile was transformative, years falling away from his face as he pulled me into his arms. "I was planning to do this properly," he murmured against my hair. "With a ring, on one knee." "Since when have we done anything the conventional way?" I asked, tilting my face up to his. His kiss was gentle, a promise rather than a demand. When he pulled back, his eyes were serious again. "This life won't be easy, Kate. There will always be risks." "I know," I said simply. "But some things are worth the risk." 3 months later, Isabella stood beside me in the mansion's garden, her small hands moving gracefully as she signed her approval of the simple white dress I wore. "You look like a princess," she signed, her eyes bright with excitement. "Daddy's going to cry. I bet you $100. I'm not taking that bet." I signed back with a smile. "How do you feel about all this?" I asked, suddenly anxious. "Me joining your family officially." Her smile was radiant. "You've been my family since the day you talked to me with your hands when everyone else just stared." As Victor waited for me under an arch of white roses, his face solemn, but his eyes alight with a happiness I'd never seen before, I thought about the strange path that had led me here. From a chance encounter with a deaf child everyone avoided, to becoming the wife of the man everyone feared. Isabella stood between us during the ceremony, serving as both flower girl and ring bearer, her face serious with the responsibility. When it came time to exchange vows, Victor surprised me by signing his along with speaking them, his once awkward movements now fluid and confident after months of practice. Isabella beamed with pride at her father's progress, nodding encouragingly when he hesitated on the more complex signs. Life would never be simple. There would always be dangers lurking at the edges of our happiness, threats that would require Victor to step back into the darker aspects of his world. But there would also be this: Isabella flourishing in her new school where I'd helped establish a robust ASL program, her circle of friends growing as she gained confidence, the Children's Language Center I had founded with Victor's support, teaching infants and toddlers to sign before they could speak, and Victor himself, who continued to walk the line between legitimate businessman and something more complicated, but who now had a family that anchored him to his better nature. As he slipped the ring onto my finger and sealed our union with a kiss, I felt Isabella's small hand slip into mine, completing our circle. Victor lifted her into his arms, and she signed rapidly. "Now we're really a family, forever and ever and ever." Victor translated for the guests, his voice thick with emotion. But I didn't need the translation. I understood her perfectly, just as I had that first day in the cafe when a little girl dropped her bookmarks and I knelt to help her. Whatever came next, we would face it together. The teacher, the Mafia boss, and the deaf girl who had brought us both out of silence into a language all our own.